Now we are working on literary theory. Literary theory in MPhil literature course is a core subject. It's a very important subject in the study of literature because it opens so many avenues to thinking. Unless we think, we cannot understand the pros and cons of a literary text. Text is important in literary studies. Literary studies teaches us how to consult a text, how to measure its pros and cons, how to go deep into the message. Because while we are reading literature, our basic aim has been to reach the meaning, and literary studies helps us to get to the meanings. Now this is going to be the first lecture of literary theory, which, as I have already told you, that this is very important subject. Basically this subject demands a face-to-face class, but unfortunately we have some conditions in Pakistan which do not allow us to have face-to-face class, because when we teach students face-to-face, so many questions arise. We generate a discussion, and during that discussion, when questions arise, it gives students an opportunity to understand things, and also it gives opportunity to the teacher to highlight certain things which exist in students' mind in the form of a question. But anyway, I have recorded certain lectures, certain slides are there. You need to study or read into these slides what is written in this in the form of slides. Each line is important. While you are studying or while you are reading, I will tell you, students, that each line, each word, each term used in literary theory is important. It invites students to thinking, and if you do not think intellectually or academically, you won't be able to grasp the sense of literature. And it is important to grasp the sense, and literary theory gets you to thinking literature as you read literary theory, because literary theory facilitates a student's job. So let's try to define what is literary theory. What is literary theory? Literary theory is a controversial subject. It has transformed the study of culture and society in the past 2 decades. It is accused of undermining respect of tradition and truth, encouraging suspicion about the political and psychological implications of cultural products rather than admiration for great culture. Many introductions to literary theory describe a series of competing approaches, each with theoretical positions and commitments, but the theoretical movements that identify, such as structuralism, deconstruction, feminism, psychoanalysis, Marxism, and new historicism, have a lot in common. That is why people talk about theory and not just about particular theories. To introduce theory, it is better to discuss shared questions and claims than to survey theoretical schools. It is preferable to discuss important debates that do not oppose one school to another, but may mark salient divisions within movements. Treating contemporary theory as a set of competing approaches or methods of interpretation misses much of its interest and force. which come from its broad challenge to common sense and from its explorations of how meaning is created and human identities take shape. Got that? It's lecture number 2. Not actually it's a lecture, it's one lecture, but it's part 2. Theory, we are told, has radically changed the nature of literary studies. But people who say this do not mean literary theory, the systematic account of the nature of literature and the methods of analyzing it. Theory in literary studies is not an account of the nature of literature or methods for its study. It's a body of thinking and writing whose limits are exceedingly hard to define. The philosopher Richard Rorty speaks of a new mixed genre that began in the 19th century, beginning in the days of Goethe and Macaulay and Carlyle and Emerson. A new kind of writing has developed which is neither the evaluation of relative merits of literary productions, nor intellectual history, nor moral philosophy, nor social prophecy, but all of these mingled together in a new genre. The most convenient as of this miscellaneous genre is simply the nickname theory, which has come to designate works that succeed in challenging and reorienting thinking in fields other than those to which they apparently belong. This is the simplest explanation of what makes something count as theory. Slide number 3 is a continuation of this definition of literary theory. This simple explanation is an unsatisfactory definition, but it does seem to capture what has happened since 1960s. Writing from outside the field of literary studies have been taken up by people in literary studies because their analysis of language or mind or history or culture offer new and persuasive accounts of textual and cultural matters. In slide number 3, which tells us about theory's effects, the main effect of theory is the disputing of common sense. Common sense views about meaning, writing, literature, experience. Literary theory explores all these areas: area of meaning, area of writing, area of literature, area of experience. For example, theory questions the conception that the meaning of an utterance or text is what the speaker had in mind, or the idea that the writing is an expression whose truth lies elsewhere, in an experience or a state of affairs which it expresses, or the notion that reality is what is present at a given moment. Theory involves a questioning of the most basic premises or assumptions of literary study, the unsettling of anything that might have been taken for granted. What is meaning? What is an author? What is to read? What is I or subject? Who writes, reads, or acts? How do text relates to the circumstances in which they are produced? So these are the areas of theory, because theory is prone to exploration, it's prone to interpretation. What we do in theory, with the help of theory, we interpret literature. We try to interpret what is meaning. What is an author? What is to read? What is I or subject? Who writes, reads, or acts? So these things theory works on. The last slides in this series of slides tells us about four points. Uh, 4 points have emerged out this brief discussion about theory. Number 1. Theory is interdisciplinary discourse with effects outside an original discipline. Number 2. Theory is analytical and speculative, an attempt to work out what is involved in what we call sex, or language, or writing, or meaning, or the subject. Number 3. Theory is a critique of common sense, of concepts taken as natural. Number 4. Theory is reflexive, thinking about thinking, inquiry into the categories we use in making sense of things, in literature and in other discursive practices. Students, I have tried to cover some points which support or which clarify the point what literary theory is. If you have any question, because there are a lot of questions hidden in these lines, or if you read the slides in a scholarly manner, then so many questions will arise, and theory will help you understand the other genres like poetry, novel, drama, and other things. So read these lines carefully, because they will prepare you to have a concept of what theory is. Because I have already told you in the beginning of this lecture that theory is a very, very important subject. It's a developed form of criticism. We no longer call criticism a criticism, but it has developed into literary theory, which is a very, very important subject in the study of literature. Thanks.